Y'all, I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of people constantly bashing on Gen Z for the most random bullshit imaginable. Gen Z is lazy. Gen Z is too anxious. Gen Z can't handle criticism. Gen Z has no social skills. Gen Z spends too much money on matcha. That's why they can't afford a house. Gen Z is shallow. Gen Z is self absorbed. Like, respectfully, just shut the fuck up. Like, over half of us aren't even old enough to drink yet, and yet you're still talking about our entire generation like we're the root of all evil? How does that make any sense? I feel like every tiny little thing that Gen Z does is just hyper analyzed to find any little flaw to blow way out of proportion. Like, y'all remember the Gen Z stare discourse that was going around recently?
The Gen Z stare is the biggest issue in the workplace right
You
now.
guys don't have amazing social skills, bro.
When you are getting a 22-year-old Gen Z employee in your workforce, you have the mental, emotional, executive functioning equivalent of a 16 or 17-year-old.
And it is like the lead paint stare because that's what it is.
Can someone tell me why they are so pressed about Gen Z just looking in a direction? I mean, you try working a food service job where your manager yells at you and the customers are little kings and queens and you're their little peasant. All for $8.25 an hour. You try doing that while keeping a smile on your face 24/7, day after day after day. Slip up, and you have a whole new viral TikTok trend bashing on your entire generation on your hands. Now, hold on. For all 7 millennials and Gen Xers watching this who believe in the value of hard work and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, hear me out. I don't think that any generation is to blame for this resentment pointed towards Gen Z, or that the generations are at war or anything like that. But I'll get into that in a moment as I break down the broader spectacle of generational bashing. For now, it's crazy to think how everybody and their mothers just love to hop on the online trends bashing on Gen Z. Like, we're not only being attacked for the Gen Z stare, but now we are also being gaslit and patronized, told that even though we are the ones doing it, we don't actually understand the real reason why we're doing it.
The Gen Z stare shit is fucking frying me because for Gen Z's first reaction to be like, actually, the Gen Z stare is something we do because we're smart and you're stupid. No! Without even understanding what was being said, just immediately being like, we're smart, you're dumb, you don't get this.
Give me a break. Come on. Seriously. It's like these people's favorite pastime is to hate on Gen Zs. If you're hopping on this online discourse around Gen Z hate, please get a hobby. Touch grass. I don't know. Eat an ice cream or something. Respectfully. Whatever it takes to make you less of a hater. Or, at least direct your energy towards something that actually matters. Like, instead of saying, Gen Z is socially awkward and lazy, that's why they can't help but do their Gen Z stare, maybe you could be thinking, what has gone so wrong in our society, in our workplaces, that Gen Zs are just starting to enter the workforce and are already feeling dissatisfied and disillusioned? Could it be the fact that affording college is more expensive than ever, housing is more expensive than ever, groceries are more expensive than ever, meaning that Gen Zs are in the workplace and they are seeing their paychecks evaporate right before their eyes month after month after month, and they're now staring down the barrel of the rest of their lives with no prospects for owning a home, no prospects for starting a family, no prospects for saving up for a dignified retirement? If you understood the existential predicament that our entire generation is facing today, then maybe you wouldn't think that we were so lazy or socially awkward or anxious. Maybe, and hear me out, Instead of pinning the blame of all of the wrongs of society on young adults and literal teenagers, we should instead be focusing on fixing the society that got us here in the first place. Nah.
Gen Z, my generation, I think is honestly the worst generation. So if you're my generation watching this, just get a job.
Really, as I said earlier, I don't want to make this into a war between generations. Really, it's not any of our faults. So I don't want to place the blame of all of the hatred and generalizations coming the way of Gen Zs on millennials or Gen X or boomers or whatever. And that's because I get the sense that these attacks on Gen Zs aren't really a matter of our generation, but rather a matter of our class as workers. Think about it. Think about all of the Gen Z stereotypes. They all come from workplace culture. They all sound like things our bosses would say about us when we aren't listening. Gen Z is lazy. Gen Z is anxious. Gen Z can't handle criticism. Gen Z is socially awkward. Gen Z spends too much money on matcha. Gen Z is shallow. Gen Z is self-absorbed. Like, you seriously expect me to sit here and believe that Gen Z, as an entire generation, is lazy? That's complete bullshit. Gen Zs are some of the hardest workers ever, with many of us taking on multiple jobs or side hustles just to be able to afford the bills. But unfortunately for us, we are just the newest and most vulnerable set of workers that the employers and corporations now have the displeasure of dealing with. And rather than recognizing their flaws and changing with the times, the corporations like to manufacture problems with each generation that they then weaponize and use to push the blame onto the easiest target. Right now, it's Gen Zs, but before us, it was millennials. I remember when I was a kid, everyone was bashing on millennials so much, you would think that they were the devil or something. The then youngest generation to enter the workforce, millennials got hate for being financially irresponsible by eating too much avocado toast, or for drinking too much Starbucks, or for being entitled because they were given participation trophies growing up. Again, all stereotypes that showcase how bosses and big corporations were pissed off that millennials weren't satisfied working underpaid, overworked jobs. Stereotypes that functioned to shift the blame of a broken system onto the most vulnerable workers. Like, God forbid we enjoy ourselves once in a while, you know? The big corporations can't be having that. The workers should just put down their heads and never ask for a raise, never ask for a promotion, never eat out, never even purchase a latte at the local cafe. Then, and only then, should they be able to afford a house. You can't afford a house because you eat avocado toast, not because we pay you poverty wages. Stop asking for promotions or higher wages. That's millennial entitlement at its finest. Sound familiar? Now it's transformed into, you can't afford rent because you're lazy and you don't work hard enough. Not because we pay you 3 crumbs of pizza crust every work hour. You should be happy with those 3 crumbs. Classic Gen Z, always so self-absorbed, only caring about yourself. What do you think would happen to the company if we paid you 4 crumbs? I can't even think about that. The company would collapse. So really, you're being selfish. You're being selfish. In fact, you should be grateful. You should be thanking me. And you should be working unpaid overtime to show your appreciation for me giving you this job. All that to say, I don't even think that most of the stereotypes associated with Gen Z even have anything at all to do with our generation. You really think that Gen Z is uniquely lazy or selfish or anxious? You said the exact same things about millennials and Gen X before them and boomers before then. So why is it all of a sudden such a big problem with Gen Z? The answer is, it's not. Rather, hating on Gen Z is just the current trend that follows a long and rich history of employers and big corporations making up arbitrary flaws in their most vulnerable workers to use them as scapegoats for workplace problems so that they can stick to the status quo and not improve the system. So, the next time you hear employers complaining about Gen Zs are so socially awkward, they keep doing the Gen Z stare, or Gen Zs are so lazy, they're all quiet quitting, or Gen Zs are so self-absorbed, they don't know how to take criticism, or Gen Zs are so irresponsible with their money, they keep buying matchas instead of saving up, no wonder they can't afford a home. Next time you hear any of this, or whatever the newest Gen Z trend will be, understand what is happening. It's wild to think about how the generalizations pointed at Gen Z make us into a monolith while at the same time transforming systemic issues that affect our society into individual problems that members of Gen Z are now both blamed for and responsible for fixing. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at one of the most common criticisms lobbed at our generation. Gen Z is lazy.
So if you're my generation watching this, just get a job.
This criticism manages to lump an entire generation into one single description. We're talking about 28-year-olds, practically fossils, who have been out of school for a decade now. We're talking about 13-year-olds who have to wait 3 years before they can legally drive, who are just now passing the borderline of sentience at this stage in their development. Sorry, 13-year-olds, if it's any consolation, I barely view myself as sentient, so. And what? We are all uniformly lazy across the board? Do you know how insane that sounds? Especially considering how hard our generation has to work just to make a living in this world. No, this shit is made up, manufactured to put us down. Obviously, Gen Z is diverse. Obviously, Gen Z has a whole spectrum of different personalities and identities and work ethics. You got your young business professionals that are breaking into the workforce. You got your gym bros. You got your clean girls, your performative males, your iPad babies. So what is even the point of lumping us all into a big group and then putting us all into this one little box? It's absurd. And what's more absurd is that in doing this, the problem of laziness in the workforce has become the fault of each individual Gen Z. The company isn't producing as much as it used to? Oh, that's the fault of Timmy over there. He's Gen Z. He's lazy. I think it's this new trend of quiet quitting that all the Gen Zs are doing nowadays. We really should have just hired someone older so that we wouldn't have to deal with this problem. See what I mean? Now that Gen Z has this stereotype, we are all now painted with the same brush, meaning that you could individually be extremely diligent and hardworking, but it doesn't matter. In your workplace, you still have to face and overcome the same biases that employers have against Gen Zs, whether you like it or not. The Gen Z laziness stereotype has now become your fault, your responsibility to disprove. And that sucks. We shouldn't have to enter the workforce with the deck already stacked against us, with our employers already carrying a misguided, preconceived notion about us based on the year we were born. We're no different than anyone else. We're just people who happen to be born in a certain time period. And sure, while the age and society that we grew up in definitely shape our personalities, all of these Gen Z stereotypes are not that. For some reason, they are all intensely negative, lazy, anxious, shallow, self-absorbed. Like, can you think of a positive Gen Z stereotype? No, you can't. And it's not because Gen Z has no positive qualities. It's because the Gen Z stereotypes reflect less the reality of our generation and more, the grievances of employers and big corporations that just don't know how to react and adapt to a new generation of workers. So, next time you hear about the latest Gen Z stereotype or workplace trend, instead of shaking your head, wagging your finger, directing your anger at Gen Zs, try understanding where we're coming from, and fight to change the systems that have held us down and will continue to hold us down for generations down the line unless we do something about it. Corporate greed, politicians being paid off by big moneyed interests to punish workers for demanding dignified working conditions, wealth inequality squeezing everyone except for the billionaires. We have to fight that. Or not. All this generational antagonism is just gonna roll over to the next generation anyways, right? Once Gen Z is out of the crosshairs, Gen Alpha will be next up on the chopping block. And boy, I cannot wait until Gen Alpha is old enough to start bashing on. I'm gonna go all out. Gen Alpha, they can't read, they can't write, they can't spell, they can't think, they can't hear, they can't taste, they can't, I don't even know. Just kidding. This is where the intergenerational trauma ends, okay? Right here, right now. No more bashing on each other. Unless it's millennials, in which case it's valid. Just kidding. Anyways, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm gonna go watch a movie, but I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
So if you're my generation watching this, just get a job.